The Great Rift Valley of Africa was created amidst violent volcanic activity. Today, there are only a handful of active volcanoes in the rift. But in many places, the turmoil of volcanic action continues close beneath the surface. Where the underground streams meet the smouldering subterranean fires, the water boils and erupts at the surface. Over the years, great quantities of caustic volcanic ash have been washed down into the lakes of the Rift Valley floor, turning many of them bitter with sodium carbonate or soda. These soda lakes and blistering soda flats are deadly to most forms of life. Almost all of the animals that venture across them succumb in the heat and the soda fumes. And then the soda burns the flesh off them. Yet there is one creature that thrives in millions in this hostile, desolate landscape. They actually choose to live in these boiling cauldrons of soda. In fact, they're absolutely dependent on them for their existence. In appearance, they're in complete and utter contrast to their harsh surroundings. They're lesser flamingos, and this is the story of the flamingos and the burning soda lakes that they're adapted to live in. If there are wildlife wonders of the world, then the flocks of flamingos must certainly be one of them. But like many wonders of the world, they're something of a mystery. They sometimes occur in millions, but at others they suddenly seem to disappear. Why is this, and where do they go? And what do the flamingos find to eat in these bitter, burning soda lakes? And how on earth can they raise a family here? Let's take a closer look at this strange bird and its home of burning soda. The lakes are in low-lying areas of the Rift Valley, which are some of the most inhospitable places on Earth. They're a combination of pink and blinding white crystalline soda and soda liquor. They don't have outlets, so the soda just builds up here. The flamingo's stronghold is the eastern Rift Valley of Africa, a great fault in the Earth's surface that runs 2,000 miles from the Red Sea to East Africa. The flamingo locations we're concerned with are a chain of soda lakes in Tanzania and Kenya. In the south, Lakes Natron and Magadi. Lake Naivasha is fresh and of no use to flamingos. But Nakuru, Elmentita and Bogoria are soda and suit them very well. All these soda lakes are important, but the most spectacular is Lake Bogoria. Lake Bogoria is about 1.5 miles wide by 9 miles long. It's deceptively attractive. But make no mistake, it is concentrated soda solution, which would make you violently ill if you drank it, and give you bad chemical burns if you tried to swim in it for long. The lake lies below the Ngandalel Escarpment, a massive fault in the eastern wall of the Rift Valley which was formed by the buckling and stressing of the Earth's crust. Bogoria is a very important flamingo refuge because it's never been known to dry out. Water wells up into it from hot springs below. The flamingos are here in force in a deafening show with a cast of approximately 1.75 million all told. The ground trembles as, fired by volcanic activity below, the springs boil and erupt along the lake shore. All day long, the steam vents or fumaroles pour out acrid soda steam tainted with the smell of sulfur. It doesn't seem to bother the flamingos at all. Millions of years of evolution have made them resistant to it. There are roughly 2 million flamingos in the Rift Valley, and they belong to 2 species, greater and lesser. These are lesser flamingos. They have carmine red beaks and are about 3 feet in height. It's the lesser flamingos that our story is about. They're the smallest of the flamingo family. Living in the same soda lakes are the greater flamingos. They have pastel pink and black bills. At 5 foot, they're almost twice the height of the lessers. This is part of their mating display. But in terms of numbers, the greaters are completely dwarfed by the huge masses of lessers. They're outnumbered by 100 to 1. Lesser flamingos are a sort of composite water bird. They have the long legs and necks of the herons and storks, and the webbed feet of ducks and geese. But they do have several unique characteristics, not least the equipment to live in the soda lakes. They're highly specialized feeders. Here they're feeding on microscopic organisms called diatoms that grow in the soda mud. They upend like ducks as they sift through it, paddling to get their heads right down to the bottom. But this diatom food is only just enough to keep them alive. And when flamingos congregate, they feed off something else called blue-green algae. Flamingos en masse spend hours swinging their heads from side to side in a scything motion, apparently drinking the lethal soda liquor. They also paddle out into the middle of the lake and perform the same beautiful side-to-side motion. What they're doing is filtering the water to extract the blue-green algae, microscopic plants which at times grow in such abundance in Lake Bogoria that they color the surface waters a lurid green. To extract diatoms and the blue-green algae, called spirulina, the lesser flamingo has evolved one of the most efficient filter feeding systems of any bird in the world. This is its food in micro close-up. You could fit 50 of these spring-shaped spirulina algae on a pinhead. They're plants that depend on sunlight, and in the right conditions they flourish in the burning soda waters. Protein content is very high, so it's a good choice of food. The key to it all is the flamingo's bill, which it uses upside down. The upper mandible fits closely into the lower mandible. The tongue lies in a groove inside and works like a piston in a pump, rapidly drawing water in and out as the flamingo swings its head through the algal soup. The green spirulina is caught as the water is expelled by lines of extremely fine bristles which cover the inner surface of both mandibles. It may sound complicated, but the main thing is that it works, and it means that the lesser flamingos can take the algal vegetables, so to speak, without drinking the soda broth, which would no doubt burn their stomachs. They remove hundreds of tons of spirulina every day when there's a high-density crop or bloom available. The spirulina tends to fluctuate from month to month, and if it drops below a certain concentration, the flamingo flocks have to feed elsewhere. But for the moment, there's plenty for all. The flamingo's legs and plumage have a remarkable ability to resist the burning effects of the soda, but they must still wash it off from time to time during the day. This is the Girassian Delta at Lake Bogoria, where a freshwater spring seeps in from the hills. It's only a trickle of fresh water, but it's enough to wash their feathers. In the mid-morning, thousand upon thousand of flamingos come to the river mouth to bathe and to drink after a night spent feeding out on the lake. In a flamingo population of millions, some birds are bound to suffer injury or from disease, and a number die every day. The sacred ibises scavenge along the lake edge. They're the flamingo's undertakers, you might say, clearing up the corpses as they come ashore. Tawny eagles always hang around the lake, and the flamingos sometimes find them unnerving. But they've nothing to fear. The eagles are scavengers, not killers. At Bogoria, it's jackals and other land predators that take flamingos, but only very occasionally. The flamingo probably enjoys a very long life. Some people suggest they may reach 30 years old, though no one knows for sure. Scientific research still hasn't prized this particular piece of information from the flamingos. Flamingos are nervy birds. They panic at the slightest disturbance. Getting airborne takes quite a bit of effort and is rather an awkward process. Lesser flamingos weigh around 3 3/4 pounds. For a bird, this is a fair weight to get up into the air, and the flamingo needs a long run to get up to takeoff speed, as this slow-motion film shows. Once in the air, flamingos are efficient flyers. It's been calculated that at the peak of condition they can fly up to 2,000 miles without refueling. This is vital because the spirulina supplies at Bogoria quite often fail. Then the flamingos disperse to all the other soda lakes up and down the rift, generally to feed off the diatoms in the soda mud. When they're widely dispersed over many lakes, they're not at all conspicuous, even though there are the same number. This is one reason why the population can apparently disappear from the rift. Another is that they can and sometimes do migrate to southern Africa, to Namibia and Botswana, where they may stay for several months at a time. Landing is less awkward than takeoff. The flamingos skid over the surface to slow down and then gradually sink into the water. Lake Bogoria lies hidden away in barren bush country. As a result, it hasn't been affected by man. But not all the soda lakes of the rift have escaped man's influence. This is Lake Nakuru, a soda lake 50 miles to the south of Lake Bogoria. During the 1960s and early 70s, Nakuru's shorelines would have been as densely packed with flamingos as the shores of Lake Bogoria are now. Today, the flamingos don't seem to be coming here anymore, possibly as a result of man's influence. To be fair, it may be part of a natural cycle associated with rising and falling water levels, but it might be pollution or some other factor, and the presence of birds like pelicans gives us a clue here. You'd never find pelicans at Bogoria. There aren't any fish there. But at Nakuru, fish have been artificially introduced into the lake by man. They're a highly adaptable species of tilapia called Tilapia grahami. The fish were put in initially to control the mosquitoes in the fresher streams. But they thrived in the soda water too. And today, the pelicans and cormorants crop 4,000 tons of these tilapia every year. Nakuru is now dominated by thousands of fish-eating birds, and the flamingos have almost deserted it. This is due to lack of spirulina, which may be a natural phenomenon, but it may well be that the fish are eating the spirulina, so that it can't really build up and bloom in sufficient quantities to support the masses of flamingos. More research is required to pinpoint the exact cause, but one thing is definite. Fish must not be introduced into Lake Bogoria. It might easily clear the flamingos out of there, too. At the moment, the flamingos come to Bogoria from all over the Rift Valley when the spirulina algae are blooming in the lake waters. Most of the Rift's population of 2 million are here. This spectacular lake is a vital flamingo refuge and is now a game reserve. It's also famous for its stinking pools and fumaroles. Some are full of black volcanic sand. Others are showers of soda liquor. Lake Bogoria is one of the few places where the great flocks of flamingos can gorge themselves on the highly nutritious spirulina, now that Nakuru seems to be unable to support this rich algal bloom. The birds build up reserves of fat, sometimes doubling their body weight. They get highly excited, and you can feel a new agitation in the flocks as they come in to drink. As the birds mass in by the shore, they're very closely packed together. But when they start their breeding display, they close ranks even more. It's quite the most amazing, if slightly ludicrous-looking display, with the flamingos holding their necks alternately at full upward stretch and then bent down in the broken neck position. At full pitch, the display can only be compared to the milling masses of a city rush hour as the flamingos stream past each other. The flamingo display is known as the flamingo stomp, a term coined by the late Leslie Brown, who did a great deal of research on flamingos. The display reminded him of a dance called the stomp, where slightly intoxicated men got into a huddle to the rhythm of calypso music. The flamingo's music is hardly calypso, but the birds certainly get into an enormous great huddle. Soon after the stomping, nest building begins. Strange to say, the birds never actually breed here, so nesting is rather a futile exercise. But the building takes place all the same, perhaps for practice. They build their mounds by collecting soda mud in their bills. Then they squirt or place it onto their nest. The top is trampled flat. There's more to the nest than meets the eye. The mound draws up water from below, which evaporates from the sides as it rises and cools the top of the nest. This means that in principle the egg won't overheat, which is important since ground temperature is well above 100. Both partners share in the nest building and defend the nest site. They like to nest close to other pairs, but sometimes even flamingos can get too close for comfort. The mysterious thing is that despite all the busy stomping and nest building, no one has ever seen the flamingos raise any young here. They build thousands of nest mounds, year after year, but for some reason they don't ever use them. Where they go to breed was a mystery for a very long time, but then flamingos never give their secrets away easily. The problem is that the flamingos might nest on almost any soda lake. In the peak of condition, as they are now, they could fly up to 2,000 miles away in any direction. Recent research suggests that birds with good body fat reserves make reconnaissance flights at night to other soda lakes in the rift to scout for spirulina and also for nest sites. They try to find a soda lake where the conditions are just right. If they find these, then they'll tend to stay there. Other birds, at Lake Bogoria say, somehow sense that the birds haven't returned and fly off to investigate for themselves. This may be how the birds get the message that somewhere the conditions are good for breeding. But where do they go? The place they usually nest is 180 miles south of Bogoria. It's in the middle of the most foul, fetid soda lake of all, Lake Natron. In his attempts to reach the site on foot, the scientist Leslie Brown burnt his skin so badly and the heat affected him so much that he almost lost his life. The flamingos choose this site because they're perfectly safe from visitors of any sort. It's a virtual impossibility to film the nests at Lake Natron, but the flamingos do just occasionally break with tradition and nest elsewhere. This is Lake Magadi, the soda lake just north of Natron, and it was to these immense soda flats, which are like a blotch of some terrible disease on the Earth's surface, that the flamingos decided to turn their attention in 1962. Magadi is much lower down in the rift than Bogoria. It's much hotter, and most of the lake water just evaporates. Also, far more soda enters Magadi, welling up from the thermal intestines of the rift below to form enormous soda flats. The flamingos, both greater and lesser, started building in July. They've been prevented from nesting at Natron by drought and flooding. The colony at Magadi had over 1 million pairs. The nests were solid soda. Mud wasn't available at this site. Each one had a single egg, which is the norm for flamingos. Flamingo parents share the incubation of the egg, which hatches some 28 days after laying. Around 750,000 chicks emerged into the harsh white world of soda. Ground temperature was about 140 degrees. Soon the chicks left the nests to take their first rather shaky steps on the lake bed. Many became encrusted with soda and died, but about 400,000 survived and fledged. When they were about a week old, the chicks ganged up together in nursery groups or creches of several thousand each. Some of the parents stood guard, while the others were away feeding. It would be nice to think that 20 years later, many of those individuals which fledged from Lake Magadi are in amongst these flocks at Lake Bogoria. It's quite possible, given that some flamingos live at least that long. During that time, we've begun to understand more about the lesser flamingos and about their dependence on the sporadic blooms of spirulina. One day, people may be tempted to stock Bogoria with fish. This must never happen, because it might upset the flamingo's food supply. The burning, soda-saturated waters of Lake Bogoria must be left as they are to ensure the survival of this wildlife wonder of the world.
Thank you.